It was a cold, misty evening in the small town of Elmbridge. The streets, usually filled with the buzz of life, were now eerily quiet. Only the faint rustling of the leaves in the wind disturbed the stillness. Leela walked slowly down the empty alleyway, her footsteps barely making a sound. Ow. She had been walking for what felt like hours, lost in her thoughts, trying to ignore the strange pull she had been feeling for days now. A pull that seemed to guide her toward this very moment. Lila had always been different. Her eyes, a piercing shade of blue, were something she had learned to hide. They weren't just blue, they glowed. It had started a few months ago after she had come into contact with something ancient, something powerful. Since then, her life had turned into a series of strange events and unsettling dreams. She could feel the energy building inside her, waiting for something, waiting for this moment. The alley was quiet, with old buildings lining both sides. Graffiti covered the walls, and the smell of damp stone hung in the air. Lila's eyes narrowed. As she walked, her senses heightened. Something was off. The usual calm she felt when she walked this path was gone, replaced by an uneasy feeling gnawing at her. Her skin tingled, and the familiar blue glow in her eyes flickered for a moment, casting a faint light around her. She stopped for a second, looking around, trying to pinpoint the source of her discomfort. Then she heard it. A low, almost inaudible hum in the air. It was faint, but it grew louder with every passing second. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. She instinctively placed a hand on her chest, feeling the pounding of her heart. It was almost as if the world itself was holding its breath. Leela's eyes began to glow brighter, a soft blue light escaping from her pupils. She was used to it by now, but tonight felt different. There was something in the air, something that didn't belong. She couldn't explain it, but her instincts screamed that danger was near. As the hum grew louder, she turned toward the source, her eyes scanning the shadows ahead. A figure emerged from the mist, a man walking down the same alleyway. Lila froze for a moment. He looked out of place in the desolate alley, as if he had just appeared from nowhere. His face was unfamiliar, but there was something about him that felt oddly familiar, as though she had seen him before in a dream. The man was tall, dressed in a worn leather jacket, and his eyes were wide, darting nervously from side to side, as if he, too, sensed the strange energy in the air. His face was tense, his jaw clenched, and there was a faint glimmer of fear in his eyes. He didn't seem to notice Lila at first. He was too focused on the growing hum that filled the air. Lila's heart raced as her blue eyes glowed brighter. She took a hesitant step forward. The man turned, finally noticing her presence. He blinked, and for a moment, they simply stared at each other, both caught off guard by the unexpected meeting. "Are you all right?" the man asked, his voice shaky but sincere. Lila didn't respond immediately. She could feel the energy surging around them, a strange connection that pulled at her. It was as if the man was somehow tied to the danger she sensed, though she couldn't explain why. She had never seen him before, but in that moment, it felt like they were destined to cross paths. I don't know, Leela finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes flickered with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Something's coming, something dangerous. The man's brow furrowed in confusion. He stepped closer to her, trying to understand. Dangerous? What are you talking about? Before Lila could answer, the hum in the air intensified. The ground beneath them trembled slightly, and a cold breeze swept through the alley. Lila could feel it now, the presence of something much larger than just the two of them. The hum was no longer a distant sound, it was here, around them, vibrating. Through the air like an electric current, Lila's blue eyes flickered again, and the light grew stronger, almost blinding. She instinctively stepped back, her hands trembling as the energy inside her began to build. The man, confused and nervous, backed away as well, unsure of what was happening but sensing that it wasn't something he could ignore. "Stay back," Lila warned him, her voice now firm. "You don't understand. This is bigger than both of us." Just as she said that, the ground shook again, this time more violently. A burst of light appeared at the end of the alley, blinding them, both for a brief moment. Lila's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the pull of the energy drawing them in, pulling them toward whatever force was coming for them. The man seemed to understand now. His fear was replaced by a strange sense of urgency, as if he knew, deep down, that something was about to change. They weren't alone anymore. Whatever was coming was close, and they had no choice but to face it together. Lila's eyes glowed brighter than ever before. She took a step toward the light, ready to confront whatever was waiting for them. The man followed her, though. He was unsure of what to expect. Together, they stood in the alley, waiting for the unknown to reveal itself. Something strange was happening, something dangerous, and they were right in the middle of it. Lila and the man stood in the alley, the air crackling with an electric energy that neither of them could explain. The light from Lila's glowing eyes flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls around them. The hum, now unmistakably louder, was no longer just a sound, it was a presence, vibrating through the very ground beneath their feet. Lila's mind raced as she tried to make sense of what was happening. The man, standing just a few feet away, was staring at her as though she had just grown another head. But Lila could feel it too, the magnetic pull between them, the invisible thread tying their fates together. She didn't understand it, but she knew one thing for sure. This was no coincidence. The man finally spoke, his voice shaking as if he were struggling to control his nerves. "What's going on?" "Where is this? Energy." "That energy, what's happening to?" Lila's heart raced, but her expression remained calm. She had learned long ago that fear would only make things worse. She had to keep control, no matter how strange or overwhelming the situation became. "You're not the only one who feels it," she said, her voice barely a whisper, yet strong enough to cut through the hum of energy around them. "Something drawing us together, something ... ancient." The man frowned, trying to wrap his head around her words. "Ancient? What are you talking about? I've never felt anything like this before." Lila's eyes shifted nervously to the dark. Shadows that stretched along the alleyway. She could feel the presence drawing nearer, and the intensity of the energy was growing by the second. The man was right. She had never experienced this kind of power before either. This wasn't just some random danger, it was intentional. It was as though something, or someone, was trying to make its presence known. Before she could speak again, a sharp gust of wind swept down the alley, lifting the corners of her jacket and sending a chill through her spine. The hum intensified, vibrating through her bones. She instinctively stepped back, her blue eyes now glowing so brightly that they lit up the entire alley like a beacon. And then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. It wasn't just any figure. It was unlike anything Lila had ever seen. Tall, imposing, and covered in strange markings that seemed to glow faintly in the dark. The figure was humanoid, but not human. Its skin was a deep shade of purple, and its eyes were like liquid pools of darkness, glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. Lila froze. The man beside her didn't move at all, his breath caught in his throat. The figure took slow, deliberate steps toward them, the sound of its footsteps like a drumbeat echoing through the alley. Every step seemed to shake the ground, each one closer to them than the last. "Lila," the man whispered, his voice filled with awe and fear. "What is that?" Lila's gaze never left the figure. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but something inside her held her in place. There was no escaping this moment. The strange connection she had felt with the man was no accident, and neither was this encounter. "This isn't good, Lila," said softly, her voice tense. "Whatever that is, it's here for a reason." The figure paused a few feet away from them, its gaze shifting between Lila and the man. Lila could feel the weight of its stare, as if it were assessing them, deciding what to do next. The air around them seemed to hum with even more intensity, as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath. "Who are you?" the man asked, his voice steady, despite the terror creeping into his eyes. The figure didn't speak, but a strange guttural noise escaped from its throat, something between a growl and a whisper. It raised a hand, its fingers elongated and covered in sharp, metallic-looking claws. The glow from Lila's eyes flickered in response, like two stars reacting to each other. Lila's heart raced in her chest. The figure's presence was powerful, but there's something more to it, something familiar. She had seen those markings before, in her dreams, the dreams that had haunted her for weeks, the dreams that had led her here to this very moment. Suddenly, the figure took another step forward, and with it, the ground beneath them cracked. Sending a ripple of energy through the alley, the man stumbled backward, eyes wide in disbelief. But Lila didn't move. She couldn't. Her body was locked in place by the force that was now bearing down on them both. "Why are you here?" Lila asked, her voice growing more confident, more commanding. The glow in her eyes intensified, reflecting the power she felt rising within her. For a brief moment, the figure stood still, its eyes narrowing. Then it spoke, its voice deep and resonant, sending chills down Lila's spine. "You are the key," it said, its voice like thunder, yet somehow soft, as if it were speaking directly into her mind. "The key to everything." The words echoed in her mind, and Lila's heart skipped a beat. The key to everything. What did that mean? What was it trying to tell her? Before she could respond, the figure turned and began to walk away, its glowing markings fading into the darkness. Didn't look back, but the air still vibrated with its power. Lila stood frozen, her eyes wide in shock. The man beside her was still silent, his face pale. The hum in the air began to fade, but the lingering tension remained, heavy and suffocating. "What just happened?" the man asked, his voice trembling now. Lila's eyes flickered as she turned to face him. She didn't have an answer. Knew was that the encounter wasn't over. The figure's words, the key, lingered in her mind, and as much as she wanted to ignore it, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Something big was coming, and they were. At the center of it, the night air was thick with an ominous silence as Lila and the man stood alone in the alley. The figure was gone, but the lingering tension felt almost suffocating. The hum, though quieter now, still echoed in Lila's ears, vibrating through her chest like a warning. She could feel it, the pressure of something unseen, watching them from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Lila's hand instinctively went to her chest, where her heart beat erratically. The connection between her and the man was undeniable now, but there was something else, something darker that had followed them, something from beyond this world that had taken an interest in them both. She could feel it in her bones, the pull of destiny, forces greater than anything she could control. The man, still shaken, took a step closer to her. What? What did it mean? The key. What was that thing? Lila closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady her breath. She knew she had to tell him, but the words felt heavy in her mouth. It was one thing to face this alone. It was another to drag someone else into it. But there was no turning back now. The connection between them was too strong. If she didn't explain, he would be lost in the dark. And that was something she could never allow. "I don't know exactly," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it's not just a random encounter. That thing, that creature was sent. It's looking for something, looking for me. And now for you." The man's brow furrowed as he tried to process what she was saying. "Looking for me? Why?" Lila felt a chill run down her spine. She had no clear answers, only a gnawing feeling that something much bigger was at play. She opened her eyes and looked into his, a mix of fear and determination in her gaze. "I think we're both part of something much older than we realize," she said slowly. "Something tied to this energy, this power that seems to be following me. And now it's following you too." He stared at her, confusion written all over his face. "I don't get it. I'm just some guy who was walking through a quiet alley. Why me?" Lila shook her head. "I don't know, but it's like something is reaching out to you. Something that's been dormant, waiting to wake up. It's calling us, both of us." The man took a step back, his mind racing. "This sounds insane. I don't even know you. How can we be involved in whatever this is?" Lila took a deep breath. "I don't have all the answers yet, but I can feel it. You're tied to this, to whatever it is that's trying to come through. That creature, whatever it was, it spoke to me like it knew me, like I was the key to something. And now you're part of it too. Her words hung in the air, heavy and impossible to ignore. The hum in the air seemed to fade for a moment, only to be replaced by an eerie stillness that made the night feel even more suffocating. Suddenly, a crackling noise broke the silence, followed by a low rumble that seemed to come from deep within the earth. Lila's eyes widened as she turned toward the source of the sound. A shadow moved at the end of the alley, swift and quiet, its shape barely visible in the dim light. The hum returned, louder than before, as if calling them toward it. "There's something else here," Lila whispered, her voice laced with urgency. "We need to move, now." The man didn't hesitate. He followed her as she began to walk, quickly toward the alley's exit, her eyes constantly scanning the shadows. The crackling noise continued, growing louder and more insistent. It was almost like the earth itself was waking up, trembling under the weight of something unseen. As they reached the end of the alley, Lila's eyes flickered, glowing once more with that eerie blue light. She could feel the presence just beyond the edge of their vision. It was there, watching, waiting. The hum was deafening now, vibrating through the very air around them. It's pushing them forward. Lila's pace quickened, and the man followed. But as they stepped out into the open street, a cold wind whipped through the air, making them both stop in their tracks. A figure appeared before them, stepping out from the shadows with fluid, almost unnatural grace. It was tall, with skin that shimmered like liquid metal, eyes glowing a deep violet. It didn't look human, but it wasn't like the first creature they had encountered either. This one was different. Its presence felt like a cold wave, force so strong that it seemed to freeze time itself for a brief moment. Lila's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a shadow. This wasn't just a creature following her. This was something else entirely, something that knew who they were, knew why they were there. The figure didn't speak at first. It simply stood there, its eyes locked on them both, studying them like a predator watching its prey. Lila felt a chill run through her entire body as she met its gaze. "Run," she whispered to the man, her voice sharp. "Get out of here now." But the man didn't move. Instead, he stood still, his eyes locked on the figure before them, just as Lila's were. There was no fear in his expression, just a strange sense of recognition. "You're not going anywhere," the figure finally said, its voice cold and menacing. It didn't need to raise its voice. It was as if its words were spoken directly into their minds. Lila's heart raced, and she took a step back, the energy within her growing once again. This was it. The moment they had both been pulled into, the figure took a slow step forward, its eyes narrowing. "You belong to us now," it said, its voice like ice. The man looked at Lila, his face a mixture of confusion and realization. Whatever was happening, it was real, and they were no longer just bystanders. They were players in a game that neither of them fully understood. Lila's breath caught in her throat as the figure stepped closer, its glowing violet eyes piercing through the night like twin beacons. Every step it took seemed to resonate in the air, shaking the ground beneath them. The man beside her remained, motionless, eyes wide, transfixed by the figure's intense gaze. There was no sound but the hum in the air that seemed to swell with every passing moment. Lila's mind raced. What is this thing? She could feel the power in the air, thick and suffocating. The figure didn't move with the same sense of urgency that had marked the first creature they encountered. No. This one was slow, deliberate, as if it knew it held all the power in this moment. And as much as she wanted to fight, to run, she knew there was no escaping it now. You know why? "We're here," the man said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper, but it carried a strength Lila hadn't expected. "Don't you?" Lila turned to him, surprised. His words were bold, but there was no fear in his tone, only curiosity. She couldn't quite place it, but there was something in his voice, something that resonated with her own thoughts. Had never heard someone speak to a creature like this with such calmness. The figure paused, its head tilting slightly as though considering the man's words. Its lips parted slightly, and a low, chilling laugh echoed in the air. It wasn't a sound of amusement, but of recognition, a deep, ancient recognition that sent shivers down Lila's spine. "You are right," the figure said, its voice cold and resonant, filling the space between them. "You are not as unaware as I thought." Lila's heart pounded in her chest. What is it talking about? She had never seen this man before, never spoken to him until tonight, yet the figure seemed to know something about him. Something she didn't understand? "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, though she forced herself to stand tall. "What do you want with us?" "Right." The figure's eyes flickered with something like amusement. "I want nothing. From you? Not yet." Lila felt the words like a weight on her chest. "Not yet?" What did that mean? The figure continued. "You, girl, are marked. And you," it said, turning its gaze toward the man, "are a curiosity, a piece of the puzzle that I didn't foresee. But you are vital to what is coming." The man's expression didn't falter. He didn't back away, even as the figure towered over them both. His voice was steady when he spoke, though his words seemed to carry an unspoken question between them. "What puzzle? And why are we involved?" The figure's eyes shifted between them, its expression unreadable. Then, with an eerie calmness, it stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Lila instinctively took a step back, but the man stood his ground. His eyes met the creature's, and for the first time something shifted in Lila. She couldn't explain it. Something inside her told her to look at him differently. He wasn't just a man caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. No, he was something more. Somehow he was tied to this, just as much as she was. "You do not yet understand," the figure said cryptically, its voice dropping to a near whisper. "But you will. You will soon see that your bond is not by chance. You are drawn to one another for a reason." Lila's eyes widened. Bond. The words hung in the air like an unspoken truth, and for the first time, Lila felt something she couldn't ignore, an undeniable connection. Not just with the figure, but with the man standing beside her. She turned to him, her gaze locking with his. There was a flicker in his eyes, a spark that she couldn't place, but it was as though a part of her had always known him, as if their paths were meant to cross. "We're connected," she murmured, more to herself than to him. It felt strange, but it felt right. She had no idea what it meant, but in that moment, it was as if all the pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place. The man turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "We are, aren't we?" The figure's voice broke their silent exchange. "You two are the key. You've always been connected, even before you met. Now, you must decide whether to embrace what is coming or turn away." Lila's heart skipped a beat. The weight of its words sank deep into her chest, and she felt the energy in the air crackle, like the universe itself was waiting for their decision. The man didn't speak, but his steady gaze remained on her, and for a brief moment, Lila saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch a trust, an understanding that seemed to go beyond words. Without realizing it, they were standing side by side now, their fates intertwined in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. The creature, sensing their growing bond, stepped back into the shadows, but not before speaking its final warning. "You have a choice," it said, its voice fading into the darkness. "But time is running out. The world is on the edge of change, and you two must choose which side you will stand on." The figure disappeared into the mist, leaving Lila and the man standing together in silence. Lila's heart raced, her mind spinning with questions. But there was one thing she was certain of. Whatever was coming, whatever choice they had to make, it was bigger than anything either of them had ever imagined. She turned to the man, a quiet understanding between them. "We have to stick together," she said softly. "Whatever this is, we face it together." He nodded, his expression resolute. "Together." And with that, the bond between them deepened, unspoken yet undeniable. The world around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the storm that was about to unfold. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side. The night air felt charged, as though the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. Lila stood motionless, her heart pounding as the last words of the creature echoed in her mind. "You are the key." What did it mean? She glanced sideways at the man standing beside her, his presence oddly comforting despite the fear that gripped her. He wasn't like anyone she had ever met before. Since the moment their eyes had locked, there had been something between them, a bond she couldn't explain. Something that connected them in ways she didn't fully understand. Now, as they stood together in the silence of the alley, the weight of their shared destiny hung heavy in the air. Lila could feel it, that strange energy building within her, crackling in her veins like electricity. But there was something else. Now, something deeper, more personal. He feels it too, she realized as she caught a glimpse of the man's eyes. The same pull, the same connection was there, undeniable and powerful. "What does it mean?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The words felt strange on her tongue, as if speaking them out loud would make them more real, more dangerous. The man turned toward her, his gaze intense. "I don't know. I think whatever that creature said, it's true. There's something between us, something that neither of us can deny." Lila took a step back, her mind racing as her blue eyes flickered with the growing intensity of her emotions. She didn't have all the answers. In fact, she had barely any answers at all. But standing here, in this moment, it was as though the pieces of the puzzle were finally beginning to come together. "The bond," she began, her voice steady now. "I felt it the moment I saw you. I don't know why, but it's like I've known you forever. It's like we were always meant to meet." The man's eyes softened, but there was something else in them to fear, a fear that mirrored her own. He took a deep breath before answering, his voice quiet but filled with certainty. "I felt it too. From the moment I saw you, I knew. I knew there was something strange about this. But now I think I understand. Whatever that thing said, whatever power we share, it's not just a coincidence." Lila felt a shiver run down her spine as her mind began to piece together the fragments of information they had gathered. We're connected to something bigger, something ancient. But how? Why them? Why now? Suddenly a voice broke through her thoughts, a voice that was all too familiar yet distant. Lila turned, her blue eyes flickering as she sought the source. It wasn't the creature, it was someone else. The voice was soft but firm, a woman's voice, and it seemed to come from all around them. "You are not alone," the voice said. "You never have been." Lila looked around, searching for the source of the voice, but there was no one in sight. The streets were empty, and yet the voice lingered in the air, filling the space around them like a fog. "What? ... Who are you?" Lila asked, her voice shaky but demanding. For a moment there was silence. Then the voice spoke again, but this time it was clearer, more defined. "I am the one who has been guiding you," the voice replied. "I have watched over you both for years, unseen. You may not remember me, but I have always been with you." Lila's heart skipped a beat. "Guiding us? Who are you? What do you want from us?" The voice was calm, patient, as though it had all the time in the world. "I want nothing from you, child. I am here to help you understand your purpose, and help you realize the power you both hold. You are not just connected by fate. You are bound by something much older, something far more powerful than you can imagine." Lila turned to the man, her mind spinning. He was just as confused as she was. She could see it in his eyes. What is she talking about? He seemed to ask with his gaze. "Power?" Lila asked, her voice trembling. "What power? What do you mean?" The voice grew softer, almost comforting. "The power of the ancient ones. The power that runs through your veins, though you may not yet fully understand it. The bond you share is not random. It is part of a plan that was set in motion long before either of you were born." Lila's mind was racing now, her thoughts tumbling over one another. Ancient ones? A plan? The pieces were there, but they didn't fit yet. She couldn't make sense of it all. And the creature, the man spoke, breaking the silence. His voice was stronger now, more confident. Is it part of this plan? The voice paused before responding, as if considering the question carefully. Yes, it is both a servant and a warning. It is here to test you, to see if you are ready for what comes next. Lila swallowed hard. The creature wasn't just a monster, it was part of something much bigger. A test. But what did that mean for her and the man standing beside her? You must be ready, the voice continued, its tone becoming more urgent. The time is almost here. You cannot run from what is coming. The world will change, and you both must decide whether to fight or fall. Lila's heart raced. The weight of the words pressed on her chest. Fight or fall. The future, the fate of the world, was in their hands, and they had no choice but to face it. She looked at the man, her mind clear for the first time since this madness began. They weren't just two strangers caught in a dangerous game. They were connected, bound by a force beyond their comprehension. And together, they would have to face whatever was coming. We don't have a choice, she said softly, more to herself than to him. We have to fight. He nodded, his gaze firm. Then we'll fight. Together. And with those words, a new resolve settled between them. The truth was clearer now than ever before. The power they held, the bond they shared, it was no accident. Whatever was coming, they would face it side by side. They didn't know what lay ahead, but they knew one thing for sure. They would stand together, no matter what. The world around them shifted, as though the very fabric of reality was beginning to unravel. The air itself felt thick, heavy with anticipation. Lila could feel the energy swirling in the atmosphere, a storm that had been brewing for days, if not longer. It was no longer just a whisper in the wind. A hum in the air. It was coming. The power that had drawn her and the man together was about to awaken. And there would be no turning back. They had been walking down the empty street for what felt like hours. The silence between them, comfortable but laden with unspoken words. The city was eerily quiet. No cars on the roads, no people in sight, just the distant howl of the wind and the occasional crack of thunder in the distance. The calm before the storm, Lila thought, though she knew the real storm was still to come. Can feel it, she said, her voice low but filled with certainty. She paused in her tracks, her eyes scanning the horizon as though expecting something to appear from the darkness. It's close now, the storm, the force that's been following us. The man, who had been silent for most of their walk, nodded. In agreement. It's like the world itself is holding its breath, he said, his voice tinged with awe. He glanced at Lila, his eyes narrowing. What are we supposed to do when it comes? How do we fight something like this? Lila's heart beat faster, her pulse quickening, as the energy inside her seemed to pulse in response to his words. The power that had awakened within her was growing stronger, harder to control. She could feel it pushing against her skin, urging her to act, to fight. But she had no answers, not yet. She only knew one thing. They had to be ready. I don't know, she replied softly. But I know we can't run. We can't hide. The creature, the voice, everything knits, all leading us to this. The storm is coming, and we have to face it together. As she spoke, a low rumble echoed in the distance. The ground trembled ever so slightly beneath their feet, and a chill ran down Lila's spine. It wasn't just the storm that was coming. It was something far worse. She could feel it in the pit of her stomach, the darkness. The power that was drawing closer, feeding off their fear and their uncertainty. The man seemed to sense it too. His expression hardened, his jaw clenched as he stepped closer to Lila, his eyes scanning the horizon. Then let's make sure we're ready, he said, his voice firm, resolute. Whatever it is, whatever's coming, we face it together. Lila nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of fear and hope. Had never felt more alive, more connected to the man beside her, and yet at the same time, she had never felt so vulnerable. The storm was coming for them both, and they would either survive it together or be consumed by it. Suddenly, the wind picked up, whipping through the streets with a force that made Lila's hair whip around her face. Ow! The temperature dropped, and the air seemed to shimmer with energy. In the distance, a flash of lightning lit up the dark sky, illuminating the approaching storm. Leela turned to the man, her eyes meeting his in the dim light. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "Whatever happens, we have to stick together. We have to trust each other." The man's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, Leela saw something in his eyes that made her heart skip a beat, something deeper than just shared danger. It was trust. A silent understanding between them, one that no words could express. "I trust you," he said quietly, his voice steady, unwavering. Leela didn't have the chance to respond. At that moment, the ground beneath them shook violently, sending them both stumbling. A loud crack echoed through the air, followed by a thunderous roar that seemed to come from the very sky itself. The storm was no longer just an atmospheric disturbance, it was a force of nature. Something ancient and uncontrollable. A blinding flash of light tore through the sky, and then, suddenly, everything went still. For a moment it felt as though the entire world had frozen, as if time itself had paused. But that was only the calm before the true chaos. In the distance, a figure appeared, silhouetted against the storm. It was tall, humanoid, but its form was distorted, shadowy like it was being pulled from another world. Lila's breath caught in her throat. "It's here," the figure stepped forward, its presence sending a wave of power through the air, making the ground tremble beneath their feet. It was not the same creature that had appeared before. No, this one was different. It was more than just a being. It was a manifestation of the storm itself, a physical embodiment of the energy that had been gathering for so long. Lila could feel her heart pounding in her chest, her hands trembling as the energy inside her grew uncontrollably. Her blue eyes flickered with intensity, glowing brighter as the storm around them seemed to react to her presence. The man stepped forward, his body tense, but his resolve clear. He wasn't backing down, wasn't afraid. Together, they faced. The figure standing firm against the storm that was now swirling around them. The wind howling like a beast. The figure spoke, its voice like 1,000 whispers. "You have come far, but the time for choice is past. The storm has already begun. You will either bow to the power that has awakened, or you will be consumed by it." Lila's heart raced, but she didn't back down. "We will not bow," she said, her voice strong, echoing in the storm. "We will fight." And as she spoke those words, the storm seemed to respond, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the very world was holding its breath in preparation for what was to come. The storm was no longer just an impending force, it had arrived. Dark clouds swirled overhead, crackling with raw energy, and the ground beneath them seemed to hum with a force that vibrated through their very bones. The figure before them, towering and distorted, was no longer a distant threat. It was right in front of them, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Lila's blue eyes glowed brighter, casting an ethereal glow around her as she stood firm beside the man. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder of the chaos surrounding them. But she couldn't back down, not now. Not when everything they had been through had led to this moment. The figure's voice, like 1,000 whispers, sliced through the air. "You dare challenge me, you who are bound by the same power? You who think you can stop what has already begun?" The storm raged around them, the wind howling, the thunder cracking like a warning. The energy crackled in the air, pulling at the very fabric of reality, making everything feel like it was on the verge of unraveling. The man beside Lila didn't flinch. His face was set with determination, though his eyes betrayed a deep, unsettling fear. "We didn't choose this," he said, his voice steady, though it trembled with the weight of what was at stake. "But we're here, and we're not backing down. We won't let you control us." Lala's eyes flickered toward him, a silent understanding passing between them. They had become more than just allies. They were connected, not just by fate, but by something deeper, something ancient. They knew what they had to do, even if they didn't fully understand the consequences. The figure took a step forward, its form shifting, morphing as if it were made of the storm itself. "How you are. Nothing more than vessels, tools, pawns in a game you don't understand. The time for defiance is over." A burst of energy exploded from the figure, sending a shockwave through the air. The ground beneath them cracked, and the wind howled like a living thing. Lila and the man were thrown to the ground, the force of the blast knocking the breath from their lungs. But they didn't stay down. Lila's hand shot out, her fingers glowing with the same intense blue light that had flickered within her since the beginning. She could feel the energy building inside her, and for the first time she understood what the figure had meant. She wasn't just a vessel. She wasn't a pawn. She was the key. She was the one who could tip the balance between light and darkness. And she would not let this force take control. With a determined cry, she rose to her feet, the energy inside her surging outward in a brilliant flash of blue light. The storm seemed to recoil, the clouds above shifting as the wind stilled for a brief moment. Lila's eyes locked onto the figure, her gaze unwavering. "This ends now," she said, her voice filled with a power she didn't even know she had. The figure hissed, its glowing eyes narrowing as it raised its arms, sending a wave of dark energy toward her. But Lila didn't flinch. She reached out, her hands glowing brighter, and the energy inside her collided with the figure's attack in a clash of light and darkness that shook the very air around them. For a moment, it felt as though the world had stopped. The clash of powers echoed through the storm, the air thick with tension. The figure's form flickered, as though it were losing its grip on reality, and for the first time, Lila saw it for what it truly was, an entity born of darkness, a creature who had fed off the storm, off the chaos for centuries. But Lila was different now. She wasn't just reacting to the storm, she was controlling it. The bond she shared with the man, with the energy that flowed through her, had unlocked a power within her that she could no longer deny. And with every ounce of strength she could muster, she pushed forward, forcing the figure back inch by inch. "Lila." The man's voice called out to her, breaking through the storm's chaos. She glanced at him, and in that brief moment, their eyes locked, their connection deeper than ever. He was with her. He'd always been with her, and together they would face this force. With a final surge of energy, Lila reached out, her hands glowing brighter than ever, and unleashed everything she had. The figure screamed as the energy engulfed it, its form disintegrating into the storm as the light consumed it from the inside out. The storm erupted with a deafening roar. But Lila stood her ground. Her power surged through her veins, the energy inside her now completely in her control. She didn't know how much longer she could hold it, but in this moment, she knew one thing for certain: they had won. As the figure dissolved into nothing, the storm began to calm, the dark clouds slowly dissipating. The wind stilled, and the air felt lighter, as though the weight of the world had been lifted. The battle was over. Lila turned to the man beside her, her eyes still glowing with the remnants of the storm. They were both exhausted, their bodies battered from the fight. But they had made it. Together. "We did it," she said softly, her voice filled with disbelief. It wasn't just a victory over the storm, it was a victory over everything that had brought them to this point. They had faced darkness and emerged victorious. The man nodded, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Together," he said, his voice strong despite the exhaustion. "We faced it together." And as the first light of dawn broke, through the dissipating clouds, Lila and the man stood side by side, knowing that their connection had not only saved them, but the world itself.